Welcome to the Kids with Divorced Parents. I'm co-host Caleb Leonza with co-host
I'm co-host Alicia Mugford.
and then we have special guest Titus Oldham joining us today.
Hey.
Third co-host.
Third co-host. This is actually the episode where I take over and ask Alicia and Caleb questions. Plot twist. It's the Titus and Friends episode.
Yes. So Titus is the one who designed our logo for us. Do you want to plug anything before we get started?
Always Babellion Studios. That thing is a multimedia conglomerate. We're using big words on Kids with Divorced Parents.
Oh yeah.
And we just make a lot of things. I've been trying to release my own personal stuff through Babellion as well, just so that I really get the ball rolling, and so people know that we're like ambitious and we're creative, all that good stuff. We have podcasts, shorts, video essays for whatever reason. Go check it out.
Yes, please go check out. It's a hell of a company.
Easily my favorite studio. I do really like the work you guys produce. I think it's such a wonderful group of humans. It just makes me happy. So we
gotta get you on again, Alicia.
Yeah, I'd love to be on.
Mm-hmm.
What if it's a short film, but it's just me?
The day in the life of
titled Alicia. Just Alicia.
It's really a vlog. But we're gonna call it.
But really cinematic though.
Guys, guess what I'm having for dinner? Kraft mac and cheese. Do 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 do. That's the symphony that I'm feeling.
I love it.
I love it.
I love it. The founders will come together and review your pitch, and we will get back to you in 5 to 7 business months. Thank you so much.
My email is open, so
that's great. I bet it is.
That was a read.
Anyways, enough with the bands.
Yeah, enough of the sick bands.
Yeah.
Let's learn about this bozo here.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Am I just getting roasted now? Is this
okay. All right.
Our first question is, are your parents divorced?
Oh, that's a good question. No.
Awesome. Then what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, I just get kicked out. Ends right there. But I know parents that are divorced.
Ooh.
They're not mine, but occasionally I am with divorced parents, like in the same room. That's happened. So I was once a kid in the same room with divorced parents. Just a couple extra words is all.
Awesome.
Has there been?
You had an interesting living situation, though. Do you wanna tell us a little bit about your life? Sorry, I'll shut my email right now.
Oh, I thought that was mine because that happens to me all the time too. Yeah. So my interesting living situation. I was born in Alabama. I'm sure that's the interesting part you were talking about, right?
Yeah. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Decatur, Alabama is a small town. Near north of Alabama, so near Tennessee. I was actually on the Tennessee River. That's where we lived, a little community. We had a festival every year for hot air balloons.
Love.
And then the other thing we were known for was really good barbecue, award-winning barbecue places like Big Bob Gibson's. Other than that, nothing came out of. Philip Rivers, quarterback as well, also attended one of my schools. But other than that, nothing really went down there. This whole chat is wild. And then all of a sudden, my dad said, "Let's pack up and go to Cairo, Egypt," because he got a job offer there. We had never visited Egypt before. The farthest I had gone at that time, I went to England when I was in 3rd grade. And I got to see London and all that good stuff. And Liverpool is really cool. Opened my eyes, but at the same time, it's just the same English speaking white people as I knew in Alabama, just with a different accent. So when I went to Egypt, it was a bit different than what I had been expecting. Well, I guess I didn't even know what to expect, because I remember the first time my dad even brought it up, the same thing with most American kids. They just think of scorpions and pyramids, right? Mummies, all that good stuff, because American media is really open-minded. And so, yeah, once I was there, it was just like a whole different experience. I thought I was living in like this fantasy realm. Like my whole life, even, I just kind of looked at Egypt as like a second life, not like my original life just being displaced somewhere else. I just imagine it as like me going to sleep and waking up in a new territory, and I was just living a second life. And then every time I go back to America, it was like I was continuing my first life. That was just the way I was coping as a kid, by separating those two ideas and like living situations, I guess. But eventually I started to realize I was becoming less and less American, I guess, because every time I go back to America, I had no idea what the fuck was going on. People were always asking me about all this random pop culture stuff. I was like, I can't relate. So, and I wasn't Egyptian either, because like there's still a lot in Egypt I hadn't learned, and like that's like I still know a lot of Arabic, just enough to get around in a taxi. Just because of tourism, they know enough English to the point where they want to learn their English whenever I'm around. They're not helping me learn my Arabic, so I just survived. It was like a battle of who was laziest, and I won. So I just got to use English all the time around there. And yeah, so I lived in Egypt for 8 years before graduating high school, and then moving to Philadelphia, where I met you two. And that's how it's been.
What is like the pop culture within Egypt? Is there a pop culture in general, or is like, I guess, like what's the comparison between the pop culture in America and the pop culture in Egypt?
America likes to pride itself on being very progressive with its pop culture, which I think there's good things about it and bad things about it. Obviously, like when we talk about like tradition and stuff like that, there are some traditional things that are really fucked up, right? But at the same time, it's like we lose like what grounded America in the first place. And America is still like a newer country, so it has a lot of culture to still develop, a lot of tradition to still develop. But in Egypt, after being colonized and like kind of terrorized for a while, they have gotten into this mindset where they don't want to be progressive with their culture whatsoever. There's still like a large youth movement that wants to be progressive and is pushing for it. But overall, I'd say they're a lot slower going than America is, because America hasn't had that same feeling of what it's like for another country to come invade them and tell them how they should live. So Egypt, it has kind of fallen back and like doubled down on their traditions and stuff like that. So a lot of traditional and like things like Kulthum, a Egyptian singer from the early 1900s, like she died before I was even born. Or like a lot of Egyptians in this earlier generation have even been born, but they still grow up with her and they still know all her songs. And I feel like there's not a lot of that in America, like earlier 1900s artists that the Generation Z are like really growing up with, because they're being more immersed within like late 90s or early 2000s pop culture, if anything. And then they're also learning about the newer things like Ariana Grande or whatever, you know what I mean? So like, I think that's the main difference between American pop culture and Egyptian pop culture, is that Egyptian pop culture is more grounded in their traditions.
Throughout your time in like Egypt as well, you like traveled a lot, and you traveled to different countries just because like of your dad's job. Did you see, when you traveled to different countries, like vacations? Did you see them as vacations, or did you kind of see them of like, oh, we have to go on this another like excursion again to, it's just like kind of routine at a point?
Yeah, it was. I feel like any kid that travels a lot never really sees it as vacation beyond a certain point, because any kid who is growing up in a situation where you have to travel a lot for your parents' job, that's when it starts to sink in to them that it is just a job. And it's not as exciting anymore because you get used to the routine. Like going through an airport is not as, anxiety inducing or exciting. It's just like another thing to get through in order to get to your end goal. And so I guess I didn't really I embrace those opportunities as much. Like I definitely took it for granted, and it definitely felt like routine a lot. But also because whenever we went to these countries, like you said, it wasn't like vacation, or like we weren't doing a lot of tourism sort of things, or like we weren't going to resorts or whatever. It was just like I would stay at a hotel while my dad was in conferences. And so a lot of the time, and then there would be like a day in that week span, let's say we're there for a week, first 5 or 6 days is like conferences or whatever, and then the last day we'd finally go out and do something cool, because there's still people there that are bringing my dad and his family all the way there that do feel bad, and they do want us to like explore and experience their country, because I think that's a great thing about Europe and the Middle East is there's a lot of pride in their country, and like a lot of great like showmanship when it comes to like showing people around. I don't see that as much when I like come to America. I don't know any like tried and true Philadelphian that just like wants to show you everything, but like that's fine. I feel like a lot of people in America really want to get out of their own box and go experience the rest of the world. But I think there's a lot more content within the people that remain in their home cities, like in Europe and the Middle East. So anytime I do get to tour or like vacation in those spots, no matter how much time is left to do it, it's still worth it, because the people I'm with or like the places I go, like they make the most out of it, I guess. So yeah.
I can definitely like get that. I don't know if that's like the right word I would use, because my dad immigrated, so like we would always go back. Immigrated is a strong word. Mance is from England, so like he speaks English and he's white, but it was still like
it's still a struggle though.
Still struggles, and we would go all the time. It was always back and forth. So it's like, yes, we would call it a vacation and we would do things to make it a vacation, but when it's like just like that, sometimes it's just like, oh, we're just going there.
Right.
Especially because half my family lived there too. And then because my dad used to go to conferences for playwriting stuff, I totally get that, where you would just like sit in the hotel and like wait for them to come back. And then you would have one day like we're going to a water park.
Yeah, exactly. And like for me as a kid, it was like the way I would waste those hours away is through Minecraft. Like I got really competitive in Minecraft. There was this game mode in Minecraft called Ultra Hardcore, and that was the community I found myself in, of these these kids or teenagers, sometimes even adults, that just took Minecraft way too seriously. That was my deflection from all of the other shit that was going on in my life, and just boredom in general. I was never really a bored kid. Like I think I've done a really good job in my life of not being bored and entertaining myself, whether that's with a laptop or not. Like I'm just really good at entertaining myself. So I think that's just something you develop through those years of a lot of forced waiting around. And I was a pastor's kid, so sitting in church during sermons, like I would, just to keep my mind busy, not that I like math, but I would just solve long multiplication problems as a kid just to waste the time away, because I couldn't listen, I couldn't sit still. So yeah.
We would always make sure there was a pool in the hotel we were staying at, and my sister and I would hang out in the pool for like 8 hours. We just sit down there until we were like
get so pruny. Yeah.
And as a Catholic school kid, I also had to sit through Catholic school stuff. So I would I'm gonna get in so much trouble if they ever find out about this, but I used to like bring a pencil and I would like carve things into the pew in front of me while I was paying attention, and I would count every ceiling tile just to make sure that I didn't like miss any of them last time. Okay, sorry, my girlfriend is over and just threw something into the room. Okay.
Well, can we see it?
It's a squishmallow. She threw a squishmallow into the room.
Oh well, I mean that's good.
Say hi to the podcast. I'll let you hear me. So
I think if you're gonna throw anything into a room during a podcast, it might as well be a squishmallow, you know?
Yeah, it's soft. It's not loud
Yeah.
on the hits.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your favorite Squishmallow?
What's my favorite Squishmallow?
Yeah, which one's your favorite? Let me see him.
Oh, he's on the ground. I'm lazy. I'll make Sophie grab it when she comes in. Can you grab the strawberry and the bat, please?
Ooh,
She just.
those are cute. I love that
Those are-
bat.
Those are really cute.
God. Hi.
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 Hey,
Oh my God.
what's
What's
up?
up?
We're talking about.
I know him.
Which one?
Well, them both, but primarily Trey.
Titus?
Titus.
It's okay. It's okay.
Out of here.
This
You
happened last
embarrassed
time too.
No, I just scared me. My bad.
It's okay.
Yes.
Is that all you want to say?
What an entrance I just made.
It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
All right.
You have a good one now.
Do you see how romantic?
Get out.
You guys
You have a good one now.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Pod.
Have fun in class.
Bye.
Wow,
Cool.
that was
Yeah.
beautiful.
I guess you could say we're in the honeymoon stage.
Oh my god.
Hate each other. Just kidding.
What was your favorite experience or like favorite time during Egypt?
Ooh. Tell us about Egypt. Wait, can you teach us how to say something in Arabic first, though?
Sure. Let's see. What would you want to know? I mean, honestly, like I probably know more like curse words than.
Tell us how to say fucking Arabic. Tell us how to say fucking Arabic.
La, la.
Oh, I mean, Caleb's favorite word is no, and he gets way too excited to say it, and it's only one syllable. It's not that exciting, but it's la. I mean, you
La?
can. It's like a double A, but you can just. There are people that just say la just to abbreviate it, but it's la. La.
Oh, that is kind of fun. Why are you so excited to say it, though, kid?
And then yes is Iowa.
Iowa,
Iowa, yeah.
like the
Iowa.
state. Iowa.
No, not Iowa. It's like
Iowa.
if you just took the O out and just said Iowa.
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 You know, try to speak Arabic.
Wait, teach us some curse words.
They're not good to say.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like okay. There was this point in high school where we would just like get into these like Facebook comment wars on our like group page for our class of 2019, and it was just people like it was mainly banter and all of that, but like sometimes it got a lot really heated. And at one point someone, one of my friends, he's German, asked an Egyptian friend asked him for a really good curse word to throw at one of the Egyptians that were just like roasting him in the comments. And he's like, oh yeah, here you go. But I don't think the Egyptian knew exactly the context. He was just like, well, this is a really strong curse word. And so what he eventually said was, I'm a fuck your sister in the comments. And in Egyptian culture, like you can say more about someone's mom before you can say anything about your sister. That's just how it works.
Holy shit.
And that nearly started physical in real life fights. Like that German guy brought a knife to school because he was so scared for his safety. People got very angry about it.
So it's like a your mama joke, basically.
It was like your mama joke before his sister.
But
Yeah.
with more meaning too.
Prostitute is sharmuta. I know that's used a lot.
Yarmuta.
Sharmuta. That one's not well accepted. I feel like that one is like that's one of the stronger ones. Yeah, I won't go into any others.
Thank you so much. So we learned Iowa, La, and Sharmuta.
Shamarita.
Those are the only 3 words you need to get around in Cairo.
Double prostitute. That's what I will say.
Iowa.
I guess a word that I use a lot is henna because it means here. And you can use that for like anything. If you're in a taxi and you arrive, you say henna. If you're in a coffee shop and they're asking what you want, you just say henna. You know, like you can use that for so many different things. And so I think that's one of the words I use the most.
The one thing that I do remember is the check thing too.
Oh yeah, I mean that's like that's not even like language. I mean it's sign language, I guess. Maybe. I don't know if it derives from actual sign language, but it's just something that all Egyptians do is this because they don't want like they don't want to distract a waiter from something. They don't want to be like, come over here just to tell them, hey, I want my check. You know, they just want to be able to do it from a distance so they can go about the rest of the thing. So if you at first you have to like lock eyes with them. And so like I still do this to this day in America and people it creeps people out. But I'm like waiting to lock eyes with a waiter as they're like going about their like business. And then as soon as I do, I'm like,
Please.
not as like aggressively, but I'm just like,
Mhm. Yeah. A nice little one.
and he's like, you know, he'll give me a thumbs up or okay.
That's really
Okay, now you
cool.
can tell us about what your favorite parts of Egypt are. I just wanted to learn how to say
Oh right, no, a lot of my favorite parts of Egypt include the area I grew up because I really think it stands out from the rest of Egypt for like sad reasons and good reasons. A lot of it is just because like a lot of international influences in the area. My community being Mahdi, there's a lot of international influence, a lot of like ambassadors living in the area. So I guess it's a lot more like cleaned up, I guess. And like there's a lot of like there's even like Japanese trees that like some of the Japanese expats came and just brought over to plant within the community. Like there's a lot more American or Americanized restaurants in the area, like especially along Road 9, which I can only compare to like South Street in Philadelphia, just like a a street that has like a lot of shops and like businesses, and it's usually very busy and touristy. I lived like just a couple of streets from there, from Road 9, and I would like it was such a like really cool surreal feeling every morning. Like I usually see that place being very busy, but on my morning walks to school I would walk through it and it's just like deserted because Egyptians they're like they're really big on nightlife and they stay up all night. Most Egyptians don't eat dinner until like 10 p.m. Sometimes it even goes to midnight. It's just the part of the culture. And so they're not as quick to get up in the morning. And so like on my walks to school it's like no one's around, it's so deserted. And this the city in general is one of the most crowded cities on earth. And so when you have those moments to yourself where no one else is around, it's just like so like I don't know, it feels so good. And so that that's like my like that's like my heaven, just like walking through Mahdi. What I know is typically a crowded place that is just like completely clear of people, which is why I felt it's almost like that was like simulated with COVID, like walking around Temple after like everyone went home and stuff like that and no one's around because Temple's also a very crowded campus. I was like, this is heaven. I love this. But now people are back, as we all know, and struggle with, but boo. Anyways, other than that though, other than like where I actually lived, which like I love, I guess some of my favorite places would have to be like there's a lot of cool beach towns, which Cairo is not one of those. Cairo is very, very inland. It's on the river, but it's not very close to any of the seas. So there's like Guna, that's a very common one, Oguna. A lot of these beach towns, like there was no civilization there until some rich guy was just like, we are going to make a resort there. And then another resort was like, you know what, we'll come with you. And eventually they built a whole community within like, it's been like a century of existence almost, you know? And so it's completely artificial, like, but it's paradise. It really is. And the only like public transportation there really is in that area is tuk-tuks, which is banned from like the bigger cities. And they just go crazy throughout those territories. And it's a lot of fun. If you ever want to go to a beach away from America, I would definitely suggest like there, or Sharm. Yeah, there's a lot of different ones. Like even Alexandria is like close to a lot as well. So
What are like the biggest differences in Egypt to America? Because we already kind of like went over like pop culture as kind of
Right.
one of the differences, but I guess what are like some of the biggest differences from Egypt to America, I guess?
Um, that's a good question. It's like it's really hard because like my experience with Egypt is not a lot of other people's experiences with Egypt because I went to an American school. I lived in an American household, basically. I still lived in a community that was prominently international and like expats. So I feel like a lot of people called it like fake Egypt, which is granted. So I feel like I wasn't really like I wasn't really in depth into like what Egyptian culture really is. Like aside from like the occasional like going to like an Egyptian friend's house or like us going to various areas outside of our like own little bubble. But I think like things like I mean traffic, I guess. I mean you saw that firsthand, Caleb. Like there is no traffic regulation. And like a lot of people will think about that and say that's dangerous. Like Trey still talks about it, how like they're crazy and they're idiotic. But at the same time, you have to understand like everyone kind of has normalized getting bumps and scratches on their car. That's just everyday life. So in a very crowded city where there's a lot of traffic, like you're not going to be going as fast to like really harm someone. You're just going to harm their vehicle in like small ways, you know? So a lot of people will say that like it's actually like less dangerous driving here than it is in like some areas in America because yeah, you're never going fast enough to actually really harm someone. So I still think there are ways where traffic could be regulated better, but at the same time, it's very interesting. There's no like crosswalks or anything. You just kind of have to walk through the traffic as well, which, if you live in the area enough, you know that like getting scraped by a car, just getting brushed up by a car means you got by safe. A lot of people will see that and think like you're crazy or like you probably just had like a near death experience, but like I've had so many close calls with things and just not even thought about it. I just like it's just everyday life. So
After like college and kind of like post college, do you see yourself staying in one area or do you see yourself traveling more and like living in multiple areas of the world?
I'm always wanting to travel no matter what. I mean, it just depends on like finances, I guess, and opportunities as well. Like, I'm not just going to go to a place for the sake of going somewhere. I really want like if there's a group or like if there's like a thing there that I want to travel and go see, particularly that I think I can only see at this particular like time frame. Like, I need more of an incentive nowadays to go to a place rather than just go there. Just because like otherwise I'm pretty content with just staying in one place or like I imagine myself moving around through my career, but like as far as like actually traveling and exploring, you know, I want to, but it just depends on like a lot of different things in my life, and I'm sure I will. I'm sure things will come up where it'll get me out of my bubble and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't have like big plans.
And
I
then
can definitely see that as thing, especially with people who have careers like us.
Mhm.
Moving is almost inherently part of the job, but it has to happen at those right moments.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to experience what it is like to be like a freelancer that travels a lot for their career, but I also want to know what it's like to be a part of a company that, just to have like that home base sort of feeling, but also like a company that still will like send you out, fly you out other places to go like film things, for example, or like, I don't know, maybe if I work within like radio or music production, like maybe an artist I work with wants to go to a different studio than the one we're usually at. Or like it'd be really cool to like be a part of like a tour crew for like concerts and stuff like that. I think that would be so dope. Just like travel with the same group of people all across the country, but still do the same thing.
Yeah.
I think that'd be dope.
I want to do that too because I feel like film like allows you to like experience so many like different things. Like if with people and just like traveling in general too, because like you can stay generally in one area like Philadelphia, but still like experience like so many people, different people's lives, and like experience like more popular people as well. But also like film allows you to like travel outside, like what we were just saying too, which is
Yeah.
why I really love film and want to be a part of it.
I think the best films do one of two things, which is one is like if someone grew up in an area or like grew up with a certain way of life, then to document that or to get put influences of that into a narrative to really show people what it genuinely is like. I think a lot of good films come from that route of just like kind of like opening up everyone else's mind. But then on the other hand, I think the other way you can make a really great film is to take a leap of faith yourself, and as a director, as a filmmaker, to open up your own mind and like go travel someplace and let that influence your work as well. Because like I know nowadays I think we're leaning towards like first-hand accounts of things that people like grew up with because it seems more genuine, and like there's a lot of really bad portrayals of like certain cultures that we wish were portrayed by the people who actually live that. But I think there's also a lot of great film that can handle it appropriately as long as you're like, you know, taking the right steps and the right precautions. I think there's a lot of great filmmakers that take those leap of faiths into other sort of cultures or ways of life and can portray it right with like the right guidance, I guess. And I think there's a really cool energy that comes out of those films as well that like almost encourages you to want to do the same. So
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think with the right kind of cultural and social respect, that's so possible. I
mhm.
mean, I know like personally and like within the theater realm, whole lot of shit like that has recently happened more so on the casting side
Yeah,
where people are casted incorrectly. And that's where I think that trouble kind of lies. I think it's one thing for somebody who lives outside of that existence to direct and create, and another thing to portray and like
yeah.
assemble too. So I think that's going to be something really interesting to dive into right now. There's been a huge scandal on Broadway. I don't know if y'all know about it, but
I've heard a little bit about it, and I don't know any of the specifics, but for me, it just feels like, you know what, it was going to happen sooner or later because I feel like this thing has been, well, yeah, it has been going on a while, and that's why it has blown up the way it has. But I mean, it's not just going to be Broadway either. It's going to be probably every industry is going to be affected by this, and like maybe Broadway is just one of the earlier dominoes, you know?
Wait, what
yeah.
was the scandal? I didn't hear anything about it.
So basically what happened is there's a musical called Jagged Little Pill. It's all the music of Alanis Morissette. And one of the characters is written as a non-binary character, and the part was given to someone who was not non-binary. They were a cisgender identifying person.
Mm.
And a lot of people were like, hey, this person's very talented, can you take him off? And they basically like gave the actor the choice whether or not to, and the actor said no,
Mm.
I will continue to be in this part, and did a talk back with one non-binary person who was like, I respect this identity, but I'm not leaving. So Lauren Patton can go kiss a butt or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of insane, but I know it's been happening culturally too and racially, where people who theater and film is really difficult because it's really one of the only careers that can legally go against Title IX. You can say, I want somebody who is white, cisgender, or I want somebody who is black and this tall. But very rarely are the shows that are given actual kind of funding white dominated, because theater is inherently classist, unfortunately, because
Yeah.
it's a privilege to go to theaters. It's a privilege to be able to participate in those kinds of art forms. So correct casting in roles where it's marginalized groups is so key because they're so like seldom understood. And race, I don't want to say rarely influences like work, but if a role isn't racially specific, then it shouldn't have to have that kind of tradition of a white person has played this before, so a white person should continue to play this, if that tracks.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like with it kind of reminds me of a few instances that came to mind. Like kind of on both sides, like with Scarlett Johansson portraying a Japanese woman in that one film.
I
and
hate
she-
Scarlett Johansson. I hate that. I hate
yeah,
that
like what
bitch.
the fuck was that? And then on the other side, we are seeing a more kind of a switch with it though, with the more
Okay.
recent like Oscar nominated movies too, like with Coda winning Best Picture, and their entire or most of their cast was deaf, and they were playing like deaf characters within the film
Mhm.
and portraying like deaf like a deaf family, with the exception of like the daughter being not deaf. But and there was a couple other Oscar nominated movies that I forget that have the same entail, but it's just I'm glad that we're starting to make this switch with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Brendan and Josh had to come in and get something from the studio, and they didn't want to interrupt. They like ran in and ran out. It was hilarious. But
You should have kept your camera on. That would have been really funny.
no, I didn't want to distract you guys from an important conversation.
No, thank you. They were like texting me too. They're like, "Oh, we're outside your door," and I could hear them fucking whispering. And I was like, I didn't want to fucking interrupt the conversation just to fucking.
What are you gonna do about it? I'm the one who's locked in the studio.
Well, no, like out of my door. I could hear them whispering outside of my
Oh.
door.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were like texting me like we were outside of your door and stuff. I'm not gonna stop the podcast to open
Yeah,
the
yeah.
door. With traveling too, I don't know how often you traveled like with your brother and sister at the same time, because I know that sometimes like your sister didn't really travel as much, maybe towards the end, or I vaguely remember you telling me that she might not like she didn't really travel that much with you guys. I could be wrong with that statement, but
I mean, just because she graduated
yeah.
3 years before I did, and so she was in junior college and like training to go into the military.
Mhm.
That's the only reason why though. Other than that, like we would earlier in our time abroad, we would take turns to go because it wasn't exactly in the expenses to all go together. But towards the end, we started going. We were able to go travel internationally more with everyone involved. But it's just because like my sister graduated towards that time that she didn't exactly experience that as much.
Okay. I guess like my question that I was going to ask too, like being like the middle child, did you kind of have like the more like mothering aspect of your sister, and then on the flip side kind of like trying to take care of your younger brother? Because throughout like the podcast, we've talked about how like kind of the youngest child through a divorce is kind of taken care of by an older sibling. Like my sister kind of took care of me while my parents were like having like fights, screaming all the time. Like she kind of like mothered me, and vice versa with Licia. She kind of had to take care of her youngest sibling. Did you feel like you kind of got both ends of that when you traveled a lot? Kind of.
I would say I got neither because
Yeah.
my sister is at least her relationship with me and my brother, she is the last thing for mothering. Like all of like me and my siblings included, we're all just very independent. Like if I ever at any point even like attempted to have like a relationship like that with my siblings, they would feel very weird about it and would just like reject it. And that's just like our relationship. Like I don't feel bad about it. I know they don't either. It's just the way things are. But we all just kind of dealt with things on our own. And like every now and then like we would talk about it, but it was very brief and awkward. And it's just like that's always the way it's been. We've always had like more vocal conversations about like things we were going through with like our parents, like especially like me and my mom. Like I'm always having like really deep conversations with her, and I feel like most of the updates I get about my siblings are through my parents anyways, just because like my siblings and I don't keep up for the reason of it feels like if we do that, then it feels like we're admitting to the fact that we're like far from each other. Whereas like anytime we see each other in person, it's not like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in so long. It's just like back to the normal. Like it's like we're living with each other again. Like we don't make a big fuss about it. It's just the way we've coped with our whole moving around situation, I guess.
It just like fascinates me, like the different like perspectives asking that question, because I feel like that question is not really asked that much. But
I mean, my sister's a very protective person
mhm,
in general. Like I know she would do the most like protect the family, but I think that's that's not as much as a um act of kindness to us, but I think it's an act of her proving to herself that she's a powerful person, which, you know, I think my parents and I joke about it a lot, like that we think that's the only reason she became a Marine in the first place, was just like prove that she could. And now that she has proven that she could, she hates it. So you know, that's just how it goes. I mean, there was definitely like still wherever that like energy came from, like there was still like a little bit of like a protective side to her. And and then I guess like there was still like that with my brother as well a little bit, but it was just very, very indirect, and like it wasn't shown too much too often.
what is it like being a middle child?
um it's like terrible. um I have really strong relationships with my parents because of it, because I feel like we've had the most arguments. Maybe my sister and them had more, but like I feel like there was a harder time trying to understand like me than there was trying to understand like my other siblings, because my sister was probably like the most rebellious, maybe, I don't know, like, but I think there just came a point where my parents were like trying to balance two other kids at the same time, so it was hard to put all of the like direct attention onto her to try and like figure out how to like get that rebellious side out of her. And since like my brother is really good at like avoiding those mistakes, like we talked about this a little, like the youngest child isn't the one like making less rebellious choices, they're just the ones that are able to sneak by easier, you know, like they're just better at sneaking it around other people. And so, you know, my parents will like to say that he just like learned from us and just like made better decisions. I'm like, no, that's bullshit. But it was like basically once my sister graduated, or like around the time my sister was graduating, that's when a lot more energy was able to like be put on me and like my issues, I guess. And like it was like they're overcompensating for not being able to put as much on like my sister, and then my brother is sneaking by, so like they're not having to deal with him as much. So it's like I got all of this energy to try and like correct my behavior when I feel like a lot of it didn't have to be corrected. I think it was just like a struggle for some time, and it was just like, you know, it was just like that 3 year span between like my sister graduating and then when I graduated, you know, it wasn't for like my whole life, but yeah, it was just a difficult point in time where it was like, as a middle child, I got so much like, I don't know, energy put towards me to try and correct my behavior, because they didn't know how to put it anywhere else, you know, they didn't know that feeling of like maybe regret when it came to like my sister. They kind of redirected it towards me, and yeah,
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of more questions to ask, but
it's fine. I mean, like I speak on that and it sounds like really like dark and like, oh shit, you know,
well,
but
yeah.
I mean, you've seen it as well, Caleb. Like my relationship with my parents is great. It's just
Mhm.
like a thing we had to get around, and like also it just couldn't have come at a worse part of my life to
Mhm.
begin with, just because like I was, you know, 10th grade, like I was at like a point in my life where I was like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't even know if I had any ambition at all. You know, it was just like they're trying to get me up out of my chair and to actually do something, but like you can't force a kid to do anything. That's just not how
Yeah.
that's not how it works. You can't force them to have ambition towards anything. So
Are you glad that happened though? Because like, do you think if that kind of like rough period didn't happen, you wouldn't be as close to your parents.
I
Like,
mean, in some ways, yeah, some ways no, though. I mean, there's
Mm.
some ways that we came to an understanding, but others that like maybe could have taken a step back, you know. I just think like I don't have a ton of appreciation for those times, but I also don't have a ton of regret for those times. It's just like for me, it's just like it is what it is. It's not as bad as it seemed, and it's not as good as maybe they make it out to be, you know. So I guess I'm more neutral on that end.
mhm. Do you know if like your siblings noticed you going through that, or like your parents and you going through that period in time, or were they kind of outsiders to the event?
I
So,
mean, my parents were very much involved in my life during that time, so
Mm.
they're pretty aware. And my brother and I just never talked about those times, just because he had his own shit as well. And then
Mhm.
my sister wasn't around. Like I guess this was like starting to ramp up by the time she was graduating, and so she talked about it with me once, but then she graduated. I didn't see her for a long time after that, so she wasn't really around to know if anything was happening.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like that kind of like is a little bit, not like the experiences that I had like towards the end of senior year and stuff were like the same, but like I felt like with like the end of the senior year for me, it was kind of like one of the darkest times like with me and my parents, because like I was still like me and my parents got divorced like in freshman year, but I just started to process the feelings within senior year, so they were ramped up.
Mm,
And it's not like my parents like did anything wrong, but I felt like there was a disconnect because I wasn't like sharing my feelings originally, and I wasn't like saying my thoughts and stuff. And it kind of reminded me of it a little bit of through it like that.
gotcha.
I know it's not like the same thing at all, but like kind
No,
of
I
a
mean,
relationship with my
yeah,
parents and stuff.
absolutely. I feel like, I mean, this is something I've had conversation with a lot of people as well. Is like I feel like no one at this point in their life has completely healed from those experiences in high school. If like there's, I don't know if everyone has experiences in high school that they have to heal from. I feel like everyone has varying degrees and it's all very different and nuanced or whatever. But I feel like that stuff isn't just something you go to college and figure out and then go off the rest of your life trying, you know, like not thinking about it anymore. Like it's, oh, it's gone, you know. I dealt with that in college. Now I can continue on with my life. I feel like something that will always sit with you, but you just learn to deal with it a little better. And in good and bad ways, like you can use it for like positive motivation and energy, and then you can also use it in other ways as well. So I think it's just kind of what you make of it, as cheesy as it is.
Mhm.
um and I don't know, I feel like for me personally, to like give an example of that, like the way I use that as positive reinforcement, like a dark time in my life is positive reinforcement. Like I've written about it a lot. I wrote about a lot in the summer to kind of process it. You know, for me, it was like very relieving and uplifting to be able to write about that and to be able to process it. And so like I was very happy with what I wrote. And then like I shared it with other people and like, this is sad. Like, are you okay? And I'd be like, I'm great. I'm able to like put it on paper. Like I wasn't able to always be able to do that before. And I feel like that time in my life where I was just so unmotivated, you know, coming out of that as well, is like I'm more motivated than ever because maybe part of me is trying to compensate for the times where I was doing nothing with my life. So I feel like that's most of college for me right now, is just like having all this ambition just from the fact that I've been sitting around for most of my high school career. I didn't do a lot of extracurriculars in high school, you know.
Mhm. Do you think college has like new location and everything helped that process with it a lot more, and kind of being a little bit farther away from your parents? Or like if, I guess like comparison, like if you were closer to your parent, like living closer to your parents and were able to visit them more, do you think you were able to get through that change? if that makes any sense.
That does. I don't know if it would have made a difference if I were able to visit them more. It probably would have helped in some ways. I don't know. It's hard to even imagine what that life is like. But as far as like actually moving somewhere rather than like going through college somehow in Egypt, which I don't think would have been feasible. But let's just say, hypothetically, I went to college in Egypt. I feel like it would have been hard for me to be as ambitious, not because I didn't like Egypt. It's just sometimes people need a change of setting. Everyone can use a second chance to meet new people, have new experiences, and being in a completely different physical location will force you out of old habits, I feel like, and to give you a chance to kind of reinvent yourself and do something better with your life. And so that's why I always think about like cancel culture. Whenever someone does something very harmful within their field or their industry, obviously there comes a point, depending on the degree of what they did, there comes a point where you just can't accept them in that community or that industry because it completely affects everyone else within that community. It will make everyone else fall apart. So you have to like kick them out. But I feel like the thing that cancel culture has done wrong is there's a lack of forgiveness or like second chance where a person can try and approach a new community or a new industry or something to be able to correct themselves and to have a second chance, because I don't feel like people should ever return or like attempt to return to their same environment, because that's just going to reinforce those bad habits and that bad behavior that kind of built up to the point where they had done something wrong. Whereas if they are to completely get away from that environment and approach a new one, then I think they have a better chance at actually reinventing themselves and not just like trying to ignore and dodge all the blame and all that, the weight of whatever they did, but to actually try and better themselves through it. That's what I think about that whole discourse. I know there's a lot of people that just never want them to show their faces in any facet of society ever again. And I think there's validation for that sort of feeling if you've been affected by someone to a great degree. But I think at some point every person should have a chance to like make a comeback. That's like not a comeback because it's not coming back to the same environment. They should have a chance to become a different person or take on a different role.
Yeah, like reinvent or like redevelop themselves into a new person, like kind of rebrand themselves.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, also there's always exceptions to the rules. Like there are people that just I want to say too far gone, but like maybe there's just like it's way too hard to know how to deal with their circumstance. Like maybe it's too universally affecting, depending on how big their platform is and how wrong of something whatever they did. So I'm not trying to say like people like Harvey Weinstein should be welcomed back into society, but other people within like the lower degrees of cancel culture, like there should be room for them in other environments, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like it's really not like black and white.
What are you gonna say, Lisa?
No, I was gonna say I think I definitely agree with that. I think there's certain circumstances in which it's inexcusable, but I think a lot of people can grow and continue to work in the fields that they are with accountability and a desire to change. But I feel like there has to be a genuine want for both of those things, or else it's a little impossible, because I know that there's definitely been people who've been like, I've changed, and then continue to do the same shit that they're up to.
Yeah, and whenever they're asked about it, it's like, oh, that's in the past, it's like not look at that anymore. Like I think whenever anyone, even 10 years down the line, asks you about something, you have to be able to take accountability for it. You can't have an answer that is like, I don't know, dismissive of it in the first place. Like, oh, that was so long ago, that wasn't me. Like, I think you have to be able to address it appropriately to show people that that was something you actually cared to improve on.
Yeah.
Otherwise people aren't going to take you seriously, and your whole journey or your growth, like they're not going to take it seriously.
Totally.
Yeah. So I think that's the hard thing about people returning to the workforce, because a lot of people don't want that distraction hanging over them of like the weight of what they used to do. They just want to continue their work because maybe they know they're good at it when not distracted. But at the same time, that's just the consequence of what you did. You're not going to be able to get rid of that consequence within a year. It's going to phase out longer than that.
It's a interesting thing that we've developed with cancel culture.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just look at cancel culture like they can never return to any facet of society ever again, which I think is way too extreme for most cases, at least. I feel like there has to be a way where people can take time in isolation, take time to like grow within themselves, and then also approach a new environment, or maybe in some places the same environment. Like maybe there's situations where that can work, but approach a new environment to really try and phase themselves slowly, gradually back into being a functional person or a citizen within society. I feel like there should be some acceptance for that, and like forgiveness and toleration. Like, I think there are things we as a society or as a community can do to make sure that, because I feel like that's the progressive thing to do, not just to like blacklist people from the face of the earth, basically.
Yeah, and there has been. You can wait. Were you going to say something, Licia? Oh.
No, I have to plug in my laptop though. So if you see me rummaging around down
But I was just going to say, like, there's been a few instances where people have gotten away with things that they shouldn't have gotten away with,
Absolutely.
like with James Charles and David Dobrik and stuff. Like, that's just like a couple of things that come to mind as well. Like with David Dobrik, with just the sexual allegations that happened in his video, not like he didn't do it, but like one of his friends did, and then him almost nearly killing one of his other friends, and just like the behavior that he has within his vlogs, like he's filming drunk people with him being the only sober one. So it kind of has like a premise of like taking advantage of. And then when he did take a break for a few months, he just started to redo the same style of vlogs of him being the only sober one and filming his drunk friends a few months later. And then with James Charles, like he has, I think, 17 allegations against him with texting minors and stuff. And he took a break for like half a month or a month, and he's still making videos, and he apologized, quote unquote. And then
but still is continuing to do that behavior as well. He was found again with more allegations. Like that's where I'm like, well, what do we do now? That's kind of my thought. Just like,
well,
go ahead.
I think this kind of goes back to like how cancel culture has, I guess, presented itself, is that everyone wants this extreme level of accountability against a person where it's like they can never return or whatever. And I feel like that lacking sense of like any redemption, or just like, I feel like everyone just like is trying to force this accountability on someone without actually presenting like the steps, or like the minimal level of sympathy to allow them to like actually figure out what it is they did wrong and how they can do better. They just want them to know that they are a bad person. They don't actually want them to figure it out why people are coming to these conclusions. So that's why it's not being taken seriously. And when cancel culture isn't getting taken seriously, then people are allowed to like take the shortcuts and return back to the same bad habits, when we're not actually like showing someone the correct steps to accountability and just saying the extremes. Then people aren't going to take it seriously. People are just going to completely ignore it, and eventually everyone else will too, because everyone is so, I don't know, hyper focused on like what's current, like what's the current cancellation or whatever. And so people are just able to like sneak by and then continue doing the same shit. So I feel like it starts with how we approach those people from the beginning to show them like these are the steps you need to take, and it's not really like too much of a conversation of like why, like you'll have to along that path to learn why, kind of, and then you're able to like kind of make, you'll eventually they'll have to make their own choice about whether they want to return or whether they want to stay, like keeping a step back. I feel like when we just completely ignore that, the process, and just completely just put a judgment on someone, then eventually down the line people aren't going to be taking it seriously. People are just going to take shortcuts through the process, or even completely ignore the process. People are just going to continue to put out note app apologies and then wait, because it has literally become like a publicity tactic now, how to get around cancel culture, which that shouldn't be the point. The point is to actually like try and embrace what people are trying to tell you you did is wrong, but instead they're only embracing the judgment and the judgmentality. So yeah, that's how I think like David Dobrik and like James Charles were able to get away with the shit they did. It's just because people weren't following up, or like weren't establishing a process to them of like how they need to, I guess, rehabilitate.
Yeah, definitely.
And they have too strong of a fan base, loyal of a fan base, and too many people who are loyal to them that keep it going and reinforcing the behavior.
Yeah, because it's typically those fan bases that don't take cancel culture seriously either, because they see what is going on around them and like, oh, but if this happens to someone that I love, then like that can't be good, that can't be right. So they just completely dismiss cancel culture altogether. And like I feel like we see that all the time, where someone gets canceled for something that is very reasonable to get canceled for, and then people are like, oh, I hate cancel culture, without even hearing like why they got canceled. It's like, I hate this, why are people doing this, and it's just like there's so many people that are dismissing the actual issues. They are just like ignorant to it and not even wanting to engage with it, because they just hate the typical end result of people just getting like blacklisted basically. And like I think that sentiment is fair, to not want people just get blacklisted. I think there are a lot of people that want humans to have that redemption along the lines, but we just have to establish like at what pace that is appropriate and like how we can get to that point, rather than just saying like you're gonna have to wait a year and not even establish like what they have to do in that year to really understand. Because I feel like there are people that will just wait around and take that shortcut of just like waiting to come back and then just do the same shit. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Or we should wrap it up.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, do you guys want to end it?
Yeah.
But yeah, this was a great podcast. Thank you for coming on, Titus. It was a wonderful podcast.
Thank you. We've waited so long for you to
So long. I'm glad you guys are doing this whole podcast. I was really excited to see you guys start it, and to embrace the logo I made for you guys. Can't wait to be on 2 years later.
Yeah.
Bye.